Back to On Purpose, the number one health podcast in the world. Thanks to each and every one of you that come back every week to become happier, healthier, and more healed. And you know that I'm always on the lookout for guests who have different experiences, different walks of life, people who've built and created incredible cultural phenomenons, and also at the same time, learned lessons along the way that they can share with us. Now, I know that you're going to be really excited for this one because I know a ton of you already follow our next guest, and I'm excited for you to learn about the behind the scenes story and the journey that she's taken to get there. I'm speaking about the one and only Marianna Hewitt, who's a leading voice in social media and the co-founder of Summer Fridays, the skincare brand whose iconic jet lag mask became an instant bestseller. Marianna is also the host of her own podcast, Life with Marianna, the number one fashion and beauty podcast. I got to be a guest, I think right at the beginning, near when the show launched. It's been on an incredible trajectory, amazing guests. Make sure you check it out. Marianna's a dear friend, so I'm loving this opportunity. I just said to her offline that when a friend comes on the show, I think I know them a little bit, and then we interview them, and then I realize I know them a whole lot better. So I hope you feel inspired to interview your friends as well. Marianna, welcome to On Purpose.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's so great to have you. I've been looking forward to this, and I loved the interview we did for your podcast 2 years ago now.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite episodes, and people loved it so much. And so I'm so happy you're coming back again.
Yes, I'm excited to come back again. And, you know, you've just been on this incredible journey with your brands, your work, the community you spend time with. You're such a respected voice, such a well-known face in the industry, which I think's really hard to do when you've done it from building a brand, when you've done it from building social media. It's hard to maintain that. But I want to go backwards today because as we were researching, we also found that you don't always share too much about yourself. And that's obviously what On Purpose is built upon. And I wanted to ask you, and I ask this often, what's your earliest strong memory as a child? Can you remember, if you could go back, what's one of your strongest, earliest memories, and why is it so important to you? And I'll tell you mine as I let you think on yours. If I think about my earliest memory, I can probably remember holding my sister when she was born. So I was around 4.5, going on 5. And I remember her being in my arms, and it was amazing to have that opportunity to actually hold this baby. And I remember my parents had been preparing me for this moment, where they were like, you got to pray for a new little friend to be in your life. And so for weeks on end and months, I was praying. So I was prepped. And then when my mom was going to hospital and everything, I remember my dad staying at home with me and doing puzzles and keeping me occupied and getting me ready. And then finally, when I held my sister, it was such a moment. And the reason why, and I think about how that moment impacted me, and I feel my parents did a great job at me being excited. And at the same time, I feel that's been a big part of why I feel so close to my sister. And I often call my sister Kid because I see her as my little child. And so there was a parental aspect. I feel like I became quite fatherly early on. So anyway, that's my earliest memory of 4.5 years old. I want to know yours.
We have a mutual friend, Audrey, and she was asking me the other day, how far back do you remember? And I'm like, I remember my first day of kindergarten. She's like, you do? And I was like, yeah, I can remember waiting in line. I can remember my backpack. I remember going into school, and it really was memories from 6 on where I remember a lot. At the time my parents got divorced, I was 6. So this is very early 90s, before a lot of families were getting divorced. And I had grown up in Germany. That's where I was born. And after my parents divorced, my mom went back to Germany. And this is very modern of my parents at the time, but I ended up living with my dad full time. So my dad was a full-time single parent. They were cross-continental co-parenting, which is like, it just seems very crazy, like thinking back then. But I think it's a lot to my independence now, because I started flying by myself to Germany to see my mom when I was 6.
Wow.
So my dad used to take me to the airport. This is before TSA pre-check. This is how long ago it was, where your people could like walk you to the gate. So my dad would walk me there, and then someone would take me on the plane. I would fly to Germany. I would meet my mom there on the other end. And I'm an only child and a youngest child. So I have 2 older half sisters, but I was my parents' only kid. So from a really young age, I had this independence of, okay, I can fly to Germany by myself. Like, I can do everything by myself. And I think my parents always treated me as an adult at a really young age, and they instilled independence in me. And they always treated me like I was an adult. So my parents are much older now. My dad is 85, my mom is 72. And so I think they were at a phase in their life where they were a little bit more grown up. They had figured things out themselves, and they said, this is the way I want to parent. I'm not going to smother you. I'm going to let you be your own person and figure things out. And I think that independence has really gotten me to where I am today. And so when people are like, how do you travel all the time for work? I'm like, oh, I've been traveling since I was a baby. So it's something I'm so used to.
I love that. I did not know that. And I think it's really interesting. I don't live in my past that much, and you don't strike me as someone who lives in your past a lot. But I do love going backwards to kind of connect the dots with those experiences. And what you just said is a perfect example of how you took that. Have you found sometimes that you speak to people, but we all react to things differently? Like for someone else, that going back and forth would have made travel really scary. And they would have been like, God, my parents got divorced. Like it was the worst and I had to go back and forth. Whereas your story is, I'm independent and I travel. Do you think you had to reflect, or did you do any work to get there? Or was that just natural for you, where it was like, I just felt like it was a good thing? Because I'm always intrigued as to life happening to us versus us choosing what life does to us.
Yeah, I think there's 2 scenarios here. So I have a friend who has really bad flight anxiety. Like she cannot get on a plane without taking something first. And we talked about it recently, and she's like, I think because my parents were divorced, and I thought every time I got on a plane, it was that I was leaving one parent and going to another one. And so she has a really bad time flying now 30 years later because of those experiences. Again, my parents being modern at the time, which is more common now. My parents actually got me a therapist when they were going through divorce. And this is 30 years ago. So you have to think I was 6 years old, and my parents said, okay, we're going to separate. We're going to give you someone to talk to. And so at the time, I could actually process my emotions, not really remembering like what was happening, but they were so cautious about how to handle the situation that I think it made me feel like, oh, it's not a bad thing that they're separated. They're doing these things because they love me and they want to be happy people independently. And so the way they handled it then reflected on who I am as an adult today. So I think as I think about one day becoming a parent, all those things from someone being 6 really does reflect on who they are as an adult.
That's incredible. Yeah, so your parents are super mature.
Yeah.
That's like, this is like parent goals over here.
Yeah, but you have to think then people weren't getting divorced. People were not going to therapy. Parents weren't co-parenting. There's not even really cell phones at this time. So they were trying to co-parent in different continents without Wi-Fi, without cell phones. And the fact that they were able to do it, it's like if you live in the same city with someone else, it's definitely possible if they could do it between countries.
Wow. And do you feel that because of the way they handled it, you've continued to have a good relationship with both of them?
Yeah.
Because of what were some of the others? Because I think there are so many people today who have parents who got divorced, or a lot of people who actually have parents who never got divorced, but they feel that could have benefited them. And then, of course, there are parents who stayed together and people are grateful for that. But from your experience, what else? I'm just so intrigued by how incredible your parents are. Like, what else do you think they got right that despite being in separate countries, you felt like you had a healthy relationship with both of them?
They always made sure, like, no matter what, this was the schedule. I spent my summers with my mom in Europe. I would go see her during holidays. She would come back to see me. And so my mom was always planning work trips about coming.
So, that's all for this English practice podcast. We will upload second part of this conversation very soon. Thank you.